right, I'm going to continue in a different place because I was disrupted in the other one. What we were talking about is money and the difference between money and currency, and how in modern day society, basically, that's the easiest way for people to kind of communicate. If you haven't watched the previous videos, watch them. They literally are the history of money. That's how I titled them. Though each one is different because one talks about how money came to existence with all the people in the world kind of like agreeing. Like again, it's anything that's happening around us has to have consensus. Maybe consensus is a much easier approach to this concept because all of us agree to something. And normally how we agree is through social, basically, interactions. Like you see somebody okay with doing something. And the biggest law of marketing is called the law of diffusion of innovation. And it really just states that if you have a market of 100%, you don't target the 100%. What you need is to target at least 3 to 5% of it. Because once you actually do good with these 3 to 5% of the people, then basically everyone within their surroundings slowly start saying yes to the concept that they agree to. And by doing that, you can actually use them and piggyback on them to reach 10 to 15%. Once you cross that threshold, it literally means out of every 10 people, about 1 or 1.5 people are thinking about something a certain kind of way. And that's basically your market. 15% of the market could easily just become 50% of the market and could easily become 100% of the market. Now, the 100% is people agreeing to certain concepts and existences. It doesn't really mean they're using it. People up till now still have not bought smartphones, although from 2003 all the way till 2009 was an entire transition period from people not having them to people having them. And there are people right now still that don't use money. I don't know if people are familiar with that, but there are like in my village, I know at least of 2 older generation people or 3 that are not necessarily siblings, but they really integrate with society still based on the barter system. Because before society became what it is, and before cars were like brought to the village where I live, I'm talking beyond 50 years ago, these people just built a mode of trust in their own name and in their own reputation. So currency was not needed. They didn't need to have money for proof of anything. All they had was their word. Until this day, people interact with them with the exact same thing. Imagine when you rely on somebody and they give you their word, and then suddenly that's more than enough for you to kind of like, خلاص, that's it. I don't want to think about it anymore. And it's funny because that's what we try to like entice using money. We're trying to communicate using money so we can get reliability and some form of like honor system from the people on the other side, the exchange. So it boils down to the actual impact of what money does with us and why we need to utilize it to move back and forth. We can dissect any concept you have and translate it into how money actually is the simplest form of like, this is what I mean, this is how much I get paid for it, this is how much I would pay for you, this is what value you can create, this is. Fuck, even YouTube can monetize like content. What is content if not actual effort? Now content requires a whole lot of investment, but hey, look at me. I'm actually trying to kind of create content or whatever I consider value through this kind of interaction. And I'm using the medium, which is YouTube. Now, we can transfer money off of YouTube and we can use YouTube to make money. Why? Because there has to be an exchange of value, or else what's the point? Without noticing it, a lot of us actually, when we go and click likes and comment on YouTube, what we're doing is we're giving YouTube data about us, and basically that data is being sold on the back ends for money. So it's still, in every single way you look online, the currency is always money. And any way you look into society, the currency is always money. We're always interacting using value. We're always appreciating value. We're always looking at and articulating the value. And the best way we can do that is through the currencies of choice. We have our own. I would love if the world works with money, with gold, but gold is too heavy and it has its backs and forth. So what we decided to do was rely on economies and currencies that are supported by these economies. Now, if you want more history when it comes to money, We were doing fine until the Great Depression of the States in 1930s, I think 1929. At that time, the whole banking system started effectively kind of shifting and changing because they started putting money into the actual economy through the companies in order for the companies to produce and allowing the banks to kind of like credit more people, give people more credit so that people can buy, and that basically instigates the economy to kind of like move in the whole supply and demand change. As that proceeded, the time came where everyone started asking for their gold return. So in the 1970s, I think specifically 1972, Nixon stood up and he was like, we're going to detach the dollar from the gold standard, which means the dollar is pegged directly to the economy. And when that happens, any bank can print money as long as it's allowed. And so long as the economy stands, the currency is actually valid. If you want to dig deeper into this, the whole world, majority of the world, I think 60 to 70% of the world uses the US dollar, and the rest of the world uses between the European euro and like a couple of other like currencies, major currencies. And we use them as a backing for our currency. So what Lebanon does is it has debt, and this debt is transferable in dollars, US dollars. And thank you, IMF, by the way. So we print our own currency based on that amount of money, and in order to kind of like basically support our economy through our own direct transactions. Doing that with a weak economy caused a whole lot of inflation and a lot of drama. That's not the topic. The topic is how we communicate value and where we see value. My own personal story with money started this story. How I figured out money is a form of is the easiest form of communication is when I realized that for any good legitimate idea to actually like exist, it needs to be supported by both sides of the equation. It needs to be supported by people willing to pay money, and it needs to be supported by people willing to create the value that makes money. So effectively, instead of looking at money buys us stuff, if we reverse it and we think our value buys us money, and then we can use our money to translate our conversations and to translate our efforts into society. It's similar to the topic we discussed about karma and the karma being luck points. Like anytime I'm working towards something, what I'm gaining through life is luck points. But what am I gaining through actual society? A chef that trains for 3 years is not really like is not noticed until he finally starts working in a restaurant that takes his name, pays him enough money, and markets him as if the chef that he is. But he has been accumulating value effectively for the years that he was training for it. The same with the pilot. They pay money in order to learn. When they learn after 2 years of like in piloting school or something like this, I forgot, I don't know what it's called specifically, then they earn their money, basically, the return of their money. Effectively, anytime you're working somewhere, you're leasing your experiences, you're leasing your skills. You are finding a way to monetize these skills. And why monetize? It's because the same way you have to communicate with the rest of society, you have to communicate in a language they understand. And back in the day, maybe because you're a doctor, people would just give you stuff. In this day and age, you have to give them money so that they can give you stuff, regardless if you're a doctor or not. And on the other side, you have to perform your duties in order for you to make money. So from one side, we're selling our money, on the other side, we're buying our money. And that becomes the actual communicative currency with us and all the world. I choose to think of money more as the concept behind where all of us unite. And the biggest of companies and the smartest of companies succeeded simply because they allowed the people working with them to be their value. They allowed the efforts of the people that are working with them to be the source of value that the company basically thrives on, because the company then effectively translates their value to cash, money, to currency. And then from there, able to actually give it to the world. Just imagine, man, if every time we're actually having a discussion with somebody, if we just think in terms of communication, like when I'm learning how to code, how am I learning? When I am coding, Who am I communicating? If I'm coding a platform, I'm communicating with the platform and creating the code for it. The more I understand the platform, the easier the code is for it. When I'm working with a patient as a doctor, I look at the doctor, I have to communicate with the patient, and then when I'm giving medication, I'm communicating with the disease or with the sickness or whatever is happening. The same with the mechanic. The mechanic is communicating with the steel. When I'm practicing the guitar, I'm communicating with the guitar to better be able to like express the music in my head. But the music came to my head because I was communicating with some tune. And if we just look at the world as a form of communication, then everything in society around us is expressively one or another a form of communication. Everything is communicating all the fucking time, and that's the duality of the hermetic principles, the laws of nature. There's a give and take, cause and effect, and there's always that engagement, always. And that, my friends, is how society basically was constructed on the concept of money. I personally believe merit should be given when merit is due. And I think growth overall is always based on who is able to create the most value. And so historically, that's how we existed. But most of the time, people tend to be more emotional instead of more, I don't know, rational, I guess. Money and communication. Thank you, guys.